Picture this. You are sitting at a table in a small cafe, the kind with mismatched chairs and the smell of real coffee and something baked that morning. The light is coming through a slightly smudged window at just the right angle, turning everything golden for about 20 minutes before it moves on. And across from you is a woman you know. Maybe she is your age, maybe a few years older. She is not doing anything remarkable. She is just sitting there, cradling her cup in both hands, looking out at the street with a soft expression on her face. Not a performance of happiness, not a smile she has put on for anyone. Just a quiet, settled, absolute sense of being exactly where she wants to be. She laughs at something small, something ordinary, and the laugh comes from somewhere deep and unhurried. Her eyes crinkle. She does not cover her mouth. She does not apologize for the sound she makes when something genuinely delights her. You watch her and you feel something strange move through your chest. Not envy, exactly, not quite longing, something softer than both of those, and more honest. It is the feeling of recognizing something you want. Not her life, not her circumstances, but whatever it is she is carrying inside her that makes sitting in a cafe on a Tuesday morning feel like enough. You have met women like this before. You can probably name 2 or 3 of them right now. They are not the loudest in the room, but they are not necessarily the wealthiest or the most beautiful or the ones whose lives have been easiest. Some of them have been through things that would have broken most people, and yet there is this quality about them that is almost impossible to put into words. This sense that they are not waiting for anything, not waiting to be chosen, not waiting for someone else to make them feel whole, not waiting for the perfect circumstances to finally allow themselves to be at peace. You have probably wondered what they have figured out that you have not. You have probably sat across from a woman like that and quietly asked yourself, what does she know? By the time this video is over, you are going to know. What you are going to understand by the end of this, truly understand, not just hear, is not a formula, and it is not a list of things to do. It is something far more valuable than that. It is a way of seeing yourself and your life that the happiest women you know have already quietly discovered. Some of them found it through loss. Some found it through exhaustion. Some found it by accident on an ordinary afternoon when something inside them simply stopped pretending. However they found it. And the extraordinary thing, the thing that will stay with you long after this video ends, is that it is not a personality type. It is not luck. It is not some gift that was handed to certain women and withheld from others. It is a choice, and it is available to you right now, exactly as you are. By the time we are done here, you are going to recognize yourself in these women, not as someone watching from a distance, but as someone who is already closer to this than you realize. You deserve to understand why. You deserve to feel what they feel, and this video is a gift toward that. Not a lesson delivered from above, but a conversation between women who have lived enough to know what actually matters. So take a breath, settle in, let this land somewhere real. There is a woman you know. Maybe you can see her face right now. And when you think of her, the first word that comes to mind is not beautiful or successful or lucky. The first word is simply happy, not in a shallow way, not in a performance, in a way that seems almost unfair until you understand what she has done to earn it. The first thing you notice about truly happy women over 60 is that they have stopped performing their emotions and started actually feeling them. This sounds like a simple thing. It is not. Think about a morning, maybe not long ago, when someone asked you how you were doing. A neighbor, a family member, a woman at the grocery store who knows your name. And without pausing, without even checking inside yourself first, you said, fine, good, wonderful, can't complain. You said it the way you have said it 10,000 times before, with the right amount of warmth in your voice. and the right smile on your face. And you moved on. Because that is what you do. That is what you have always done. You learned somewhere along the way, maybe very early in your life, that the honest answer to "how are you" is not always welcome, that too much truth makes people uncomfortable, that a woman who admits to sadness or frustration or loneliness is a woman who is being difficult or needy or not managing herself properly. So you learned to manage, you learned to perform, you learned to produce on demand and with remarkable consistency the emotional presentation that the people around you needed to see. You got so good at it that after a while you stopped noticing the gap between the performance and the truth. You stopped checking inside. You stopped asking yourself what you actually felt, because the answer was almost beside the point. The performance was what mattered. The performance was what kept everything running smoothly. And you did this for so long, for decades in many cases, that something else happened. Something quieter and more damaging than you may have fully reckoned with. You lost the ability to feel your own emotions in real time. Not all of them, not always. But enough that your internal life became something you processed later, in private, in the small hours, or not at all. Enough that your grief did not get grieved and your anger did not get expressed, and your joy did not get fully inhabited. Enough that you became, in a way that happened so gradually, you could not mark the moment it began, a stranger to your own interior world. This is not a criticism. This is not something you did wrong. This is something that happened to an entire generation of women who were raised with a very specific set of instructions about what their emotional life was supposed to look like. Quiet, manageable, presentable, available to others but not too much of a burden on them. You were taught that how you feel is secondary to how you appear. You were taught that the needs of the room come before the truth of your chest. You were taught so early and so thoroughly that you probably did not even know you were being taught at all. And the women around you were taught the same things. Which means that for much of your life, you have been in relationships and friendships and family systems where everyone was performing and almost no one was truly present to themselves, where the emotional truth was always happening underneath the official version, where the real conversation was always the one that never got spoken out loud. You are not wrong for having lived this way. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are a woman who did exactly what she was asked to do by a world that did not always ask wisely. You learned to be palatable. You learned to be manageable. You learned to smooth things over and hold things together and keep the surface looking calm regardless of what was happening underneath it. That took enormous skill and enormous energy, and you did it beautifully, but you paid a price for it, and part of that price was this. You became somewhat disconnected from your own felt experience of being alive. Here is what the happiest women have discovered, and it is not what you might expect. They did not discover that it is important to express every feeling the moment you have it. They did not become women who say whatever they think, regardless of the impact. Now what they discovered is something quieter and more profound than that. They discovered the practice of checking in. The habit of pausing just for a moment before the automatic answer, before the performed response, and actually asking themselves, what is true right now? What am I actually feeling? Not what should I be feeling, or what would be most convenient to be feeling, or what am I allowed to be feeling in this context? Just what is true? And then, this is the part that changes everything. They stopped editing the answer. They stopped making their inner experience smaller or more palatable before it was allowed to exist. They let it be what it was. Sadness was allowed to be sadness. Joy was allowed to be enormous and unseemly. Frustration was allowed to have weight. Loneliness was allowed to be said out loud, at least to themselves, at least in the privacy of their own hearts. They stopped performing their inner life and started inhabiting it. What this produces, this practice of emotional honesty with yourself, is something that looks from the outside like contentment, like peace, like the woman in the cafe who laughs without covering her mouth. Because when you stop spending energy on the performance, that energy becomes available for something else. When you stop managing how you appear and start actually being present to how you feel, a life becomes more textured, more alive, more genuinely interesting. The coffee tastes better. The afternoon light means something. The conversation with the woman at the post office is not just a thing to get through, but a small human encounter worth having. The happiest women you know are not performing their happiness. They are feeling it. And the reason they can feel it is because they have gotten honest, deeply, quietly, privately honest about everything else they feel too. The happiness is not the absence of difficulty. It is the presence of a woman who is no longer lying to herself about what she is experiencing. If this is resonating with you, I want you to drop a comment below and tell me your experience. Your story matters, and it helps other women feel less alone. The second thing the happiest women over 60 have in common is that they have made the complete and final decision to stop seeking approval, even from the people they love most. You picture this particular kind of afternoon. You have spent 3 hours preparing for a family gathering. The house is clean in the way that only happens when someone has been working since early morning. The food is something you made with real thought and real effort, a dish that took time, that required several trips to the store, that you stayed up late finishing. The table is set. You have thought of everyone. And when the people you love arrive and sit down and eat and talk and leave, not one person says anything about any of it. Not because they are cruel people, not because they do not love you, but because they have grown accustomed to this being done, and things we grow accustomed to tend to become invisible to us. You drive home, or you close the door behind them, and you feel something that you have probably felt more times than you can count. A specific, quiet ache that is hard to name precisely. It is not quite hurt, and not quite anger, and not quite sadness. It is the feeling of having given something real and had it go unacknowledged. And then, almost immediately, you feel something worse. The guilt of having needed acknowledgement in the first place, because you know you are supposed to do these things out of love. You know you are not supposed to need the thanks. You know that needing recognition is, supposedly, a small and slightly embarrassing want. So you fold it up quickly and put it somewhere out of sight and tell yourself, it does not matter. But it does matter, and the fact that it matters is not a character flaw. It is a deeply human response to a very real dynamic. The need for acknowledgement, for your effort to be seen, for your presence to register, for the people you love to reflect back to you that you matter, is not vanity. It is not weakness. It is one of the oldest and most fundamental human needs there is. You came into the world needing to be seen. You will leave it still needing that. The question is not whether you have that need. The question is where you are looking to have it met. Here is the truth that sits underneath the ache of unacknowledged effort. When you are in a pattern of seeking approval, even loving family approval, you have placed the control of your own sense of worth outside of yourself. You have essentially handed someone else the lever that regulates how you feel about yourself, and you have trusted them to pull it at the right moments. And the painful thing, the thing that keeps this pattern going for so many years, is that sometimes they do pull it. Sometimes they say exactly the right thing, sometimes they notice, sometimes they thank you. And in those moments, the relief is so immediate and so sweet that it reinforces everything. It reinforces the effort, it reinforces the watching and waiting. It reinforces the belief that if you just do enough, the acknowledgement will come. But you cannot control when it comes. You cannot make someone see you if they are not looking. And the more years you spend reaching toward other people's eyes as the place where your value is confirmed, the further you drift from the one place where your value actually lives, inside you. In your own clear-eyed recognition of who you are and what you bring and why your presence matters. You are not wrong to have wanted to be seen. You are not broken because decades of being the person who holds everything together while often remaining invisible have taken a toll. You are not too sensitive for having needed acknowledgement that did not reliably come. You are a woman who was taught that her worth was something to be earned and conferred by others, and who worked herself, in many cases, to exhaustion in pursuit of that conferral. That is not a personal failing. Well, that is a pattern so common among women of your generation that it is almost more unusual to find a woman who escaped it. What the happiest women have discovered, the thing that looks from the outside like a kind of serene self-sufficiency, is that at some point they moved the lever back inside themselves, not in a cold or armored way, not by becoming indifferent to whether people love them or appreciate them, but by deciding in a quiet and fundamental way that their sense of their own worth would no longer be determined by whether someone else confirmed it on any given afternoon. They stopped cooking from a place of needing to be thanked and started cooking from a place of loving to feed people. They stopped making efforts from a place of needing them to be acknowledged and started making efforts from a place of simply being the kind of woman who shows up fully. They stopped looking at the people they love and waiting, watching, calculating, hoping for the moment of being seen. And what happened when they did this is something almost paradoxical. They became more genuinely present in their relationships, more warm, more relaxed, because they were no longer running a background calculation of whether this moment was adding to or subtracting from their worth. And something else happened too. The people in their lives, the ones capable of seeing them, actually started to see them more clearly, because the energy of a woman who is no longer performing for approval is a completely different energy from the one who is seeking it. There is a stillness there, a groundedness, a sense of a person who is not waiting for you to complete them. And that kind of presence is genuinely compelling. You do not need anyone's eyes to confirm your value. Your value is not something that can be conferred or removed by another person's attention. The women who have figured this out carry something that looks from the outside like confidence, but from the inside feels like something much quieter, like simply knowing what you already know. The third thing the happiest women over 60 have in common is that they have made peace with their past, not by excusing it or forgetting it, but by refusing to let it hold court over their present. There is a particular kind of mental activity that many women know very well. It happens most often at night, or in the quiet stretches of a Sunday afternoon, or in the middle of a task that does not require very much thought. You are doing something ordinary, folding laundry, driving a familiar route, sitting with a cup of tea going cold in your hands, and without any invitation, without any warning, a memory arrives. Or not even a full memory, more like a fragment, a scene, a sentence someone said to you 20 years ago, or 10, or last spring, that still has the power to make something tighten in your chest. A decision you made that you have replayed so many times the edges have gone soft, but the ache has not. A version of yourself from some earlier chapter of your life, younger, more hopeful, less guarded, standing in a situation you cannot change and could not have changed, and still wishing you had done it differently. This is not rumination in the clinical sense, though it can tip into that. This is something more ordinary and more universal. This is the way the past lives inside a person who has not yet fully found a way to put it down. And the thing about carrying the past, the way many women do, as a case file, as evidence, as a running argument you are always in the middle of, is that it does not stay in the past. It travels with you. It comes to the dinner table and the quiet Saturday morning and the moment when something genuinely good is happening in your present life. And it whispers, "But remember, but what about? But you should have." There is a deep psychological truth underneath this. The mind returns to unresolved things. It is not punishing you. It is not broken. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do, which is to flag incomplete emotional business, things that were not fully processed, griefs that were not fully grieved, anger that was not fully expressed, losses that were mourned on the surface but never quite in the full, dark, undignified way that real mourning requires. When something has not been fully felt, the mind does not file it away. It keeps pulling it back up, keeps presenting it, keeps asking, "Are we done with this? Have we done everything we need to do with this?" The problem is not that the mind does this. The problem is that most women were never taught what it means to be actually done with something. They were taught to get over it, to move on, to count their blessings, to not dwell. They were taught that revisiting painful things is self-indulgent, that grief has a timeline after which it becomes inappropriate, that a woman who is still affected by something that happened years ago is a woman who has not done the work of pulling herself together. So they tried to file things away before the filing was complete. They tried to close chapters before the last page had been fully read. And the mind, faithful and insistent, kept reopening them. You are not broken for having a past that still has weight. You are not behind for having losses that still ache. You are not weak for having things you have not fully made peace with. You are a woman who was told to get over things before she was given the tools to actually get through them, and who did the best she possibly could within that constraint. The weight you carry is not evidence of your failure. It is evidence of the depth of your emotional life, the realness of your attachments, the full degree to which you were present for the experiences that shaped you. Here is what the happiest women have discovered about the past, and it is something that changes everything once you truly understand it. Making peace with your past does not mean convincing yourself that what happened was okay. It does not mean erasing the memory, softening the facts, or reaching a place where you look back and say, "It all worked out for the best." Some things do not work out for the best. Some losses are real losses. Some choices, yours or other people's, were genuinely destructive. Some chapters of your life were genuinely hard in ways that did not resolve neatly and do not deserve to be reframed into something prettier than they were. Making peace with your past means something far more specific and far more powerful than any of that. It means deciding that the woman you are right now is not going to be governed by the woman you were then. Though it means recognizing that the case you have been building, the argument you have been rehearsing, the verdict you have been reaching and re-reaching about yourself or about someone else or about life in general, does not have to continue in perpetuity. It means recognizing that you can honor what happened, feel what you feel about it, hold it with full honesty and full compassion, and still choose to live predominantly in the present rather than predominantly in the past. This is not a one-time decision. The women who have found peace with their history made that decision many times across many years in many different rooms. They made it on the difficult mornings and the quiet Sundays and the nights when the replay started again. They made it not by suppressing what came up, but by learning to say, "Yes, I see you, I know what you are, and I am choosing to come back here, to this room, to this day, to this version of my life that is still happening." The past is a country you have already visited. You do not have to stop knowing it existed, but you are not required to live there anymore. The fourth thing the happiest women over 60 have in common is that they have built a genuine, loving, nourishing relationship with their own solitude. and they have stopped treating aloneness as a problem to be solved. Think of a Saturday that is fully yours, no obligations that have come from someone else's need. No plans that were made from a place of not wanting to be alone, rather than from genuine desire. Just a day with no agenda other than your own quiet preference. For some women reading this, the image that comes with that description feels like relief, like setting down something heavy you have been carrying for a long time. For others, the image brings a different feeling, a kind of restlessness or low-level anxiety, or something you might call emptiness, but which, if you sat with it honestly, might reveal itself to be something else. The sensation of a silence that feels too loud. The sensation of a space that shows you, without distraction or company to fill the frame, exactly who is in the room. This is the moment that many women have spent the better part of their lives avoiding. Not consciously, not with full awareness, but in the way that you arrange your calendar and your commitments and your conversations, so that there is always something going on, always someone nearby, always a reason to be doing something other than simply sitting with yourself. And this avoidance is so culturally sanctioned, so completely acceptable, so easy to disguise as productivity or sociability or love for other people, that it often goes unexamined for decades. But underneath the busyness and the scheduling and the always having something on, there is a question being avoided. And the question is this: do I actually like who is here when no one else is? This is not a comfortable question. It is one of the bravest questions a person can face, because the honest answer requires you to look at yourself without the roles that usually define you, without being someone's mother or grandmother or friend or former wife or colleague, and to ask what is actually here when all of that falls away. And for many women, the first time they truly sit with that question, the answer is complicated. There are parts of themselves they have not spent much time with, parts that are unfamiliar or that seem to want things they have not been allowed to want, parts that are grieving things that were never fully grieved, parts that are angry in ways that have not been expressed, parts that are underneath all the competence and the managing and the showing up for everyone else, profoundly tired. You are not alone in having run from this room. Most of us run from it. We run because we were taught that solitude is loneliness, and loneliness is the great social failure, the sign that no one chose you, the evidence that something is wrong. We were raised in a culture that treats the person eating alone or spending the weekend without plans as a figure to be pitied, as a problem to be fixed, as a signal that the social ecosystem around that person has somehow broken down. We were never taught that solitude is a skill, a pleasure, a form of self-respect. We were never taught that the most interesting companion you will ever have access to is yourself. The happiest women over 60 have figured this out. They have figured it out through necessity in many cases, through the death of a partner, through children who grew up and built their own lives, through the natural attrition of the social world that happens as we age. But the women who have truly made peace with it, the ones who glow with it, did not just accept solitude as a condition they had to endure. They courted it. They developed it. They learned to bring the same quality of attention to their own company that they would bring to a beloved friend. They learned what they actually enjoy, not what they enjoy in the company of others, not what they do because it makes them a good guest or a good host, but what genuinely delights them when no one is watching and no one needs to be impressed. For some women, this revealed itself to be surprisingly quiet things, sitting in a garden at a particular hour of the day, or reading in a room where no one will interrupt, or cooking without any particular destination in mind, or walking the same route they have walked for years and noticing something new in it every time. For others, it revealed a creative life that had been put aside for decades and was still waiting, patient and alive, to be picked back up. What all of these women found, in their different ways, was this: the company of themselves, properly met and properly attended to, is not the consolation prize of a life where the other options fell away. It is a genuine joy. It is a specific and irreplaceable quality of being present to your own experience, your own thought, your own preferences, your own deeply individual way of moving through a day. It is the discovery, sometimes stunning, sometimes slow, sometimes both, that you are someone worth spending time with. If this video is speaking to something you have lived through, share it with a woman in your life who needs to hear it today. You might change someone's entire week. The fifth thing the happiest women over 60 have in common is that they stopped shrinking themselves. And they did it without apology and without waiting for permission. You know the particular kind of shrinking I mean. It is not dramatic. It rarely announces itself. It is the sentence you do not finish because you noticed someone in the room starting to look impatient. It is the opinion you have but choose not to voice because you already know it will be dismissed or cause a problem or require you to defend it in a way you do not have the energy for today. It is the laugh you make smaller than it wants to be. The space you take up at the table, literally, physically. The way you pull your chair in, keep your elbows close, but make yourself compact and contained, as though you are always slightly apologizing for existing in 3 dimensions. It is the way you have learned to calibrate yourself, your volume, your enthusiasm, your needs, your opinions, your very presence, to the level that the people around you seem able to tolerate. You learned this early. Most women did. You learned it from the way people responded when you were too loud, or too much, or too insistent, or too obvious about wanting something. No, you learned it from the look on someone's face when your excitement outpaced theirs. You learned it from being called difficult, or intense, or hard to be around, and choosing, because the alternative was too costly, to make yourself easier, to make yourself smaller, to become the kind of woman who fits, who does not rock the boat, who can be in a room without changing its temperature. And this was a survival skill. Let us be clear about that. In many of the environments where women of your generation grew up and built their lives, shrinking yourself was not a choice made from weakness. It was a strategy employed in the service of survival. In households where a woman's bigness was threatening, in workplaces where a woman's confidence was called something less flattering, in marriages where the equilibrium was maintained by everyone knowing their proper size. You learned to make yourself small because the world taught you, say repeatedly and from a young age, that your full size was inconvenient. And you were not wrong to learn it. You were wise to learn it. You kept yourself safe and functional, and able to operate in environments that would not have welcomed the full version of you. But here is what happened over time. Here is the cost that accumulated in ways you may not have fully named. You got so good at the shrinking that it stopped being a choice and became a default. You got so accustomed to calibrating yourself to other people's comfort levels that you forgot you had a natural size. You started to need permission to be yourself, and then you stopped even knowing how to ask for it. The happiest women over 60 have stopped waiting for that permission. Not all at once, not in a single dramatic moment of self-declaration, but in 100 small refusals, the sentence they finished even when they could see someone getting impatient. The opinion they shared, even knowing it, would generate pushback. The laugh that came out full and unchecked because they simply stopped cutting it short. The chair they pulled away from the table rather than in. The conversation where they said what they actually thought rather than the version they calculated would be easiest to receive. This is not rudeness. It is not aggression. It is not the decision to be careless with other people's feelings in the name of self-expression. The happiest women are not women who have decided that everyone else's comfort is irrelevant. They are women who have decided that their own presence is not something to be apologized for. They have decided that they are allowed to take up space, real, honest, full, unedited space in their own lives. They have decided that a woman who has lived 6 or 7 decades and worked and loved and grieved and endured and built things and lost things and survived things that would have broken a lesser character has absolutely earned the right to exist at her full size. What this produces, and this is the part that surprises people, is not conflict, or not mostly. What it produces most often is a profound relaxation, because the shrinking takes enormous energy. Holding yourself at 3/4 of your natural size all day and every day across every interaction is exhausting in a way that you only fully understand once you stop doing it. The women who have stopped are not doing it loudly or triumphantly. They are not making speeches about it. They are simply, and this is the word that matters, at ease. Their shoulders are lower. Their voices are fuller. Their laughs are longer. They take up the space they were always supposed to take up. And they do it without drama, because there is no drama in simply being yourself. You were never too much. The rooms were too small. The 6th thing the happiest women over 60 have in common is that they discovered, and this is perhaps the most powerful thing of all, that joy is not something that happens to them. It is something they practice. There is a very common idea about happiness, so common that it is almost a background assumption of the culture. But that happiness is something that arrives from outside, that it is the natural result of good circumstances, of the right relationship, the right health, the right financial situation, the right alignment of the external world with what you need it to be. And when those circumstances arrive, happiness arrives with them. And when they do not, or when they go away, happiness goes with them. This model of happiness has enormous surface plausibility, because it is true that good circumstances tend to produce good feelings. It is true that grief and loss and struggle are real, and that they genuinely affect the quality of your inner life. It is true that the external world is not irrelevant to how you feel. But what this model gets catastrophically wrong, what it misses in a way that can quietly ruin decades of a person's life, is the idea that you are primarily a passive receiver of circumstances, and that the quality of your inner life is essentially downstream of what happens to you. Because here is what the research consistently shows, and here is what the happiest women demonstrate in the actual lived texture of their days. Happiness is a practice before it is a state. It is built quietly and deliberately, and without fanfare, through the choices you make about where to put your attention, through the capacity you develop over time and with effort, to look at an ordinary life and find the real things in it, not the Instagram version, not the performed gratitude, but the actual specific things that are genuinely good in the room you are actually in on the day you are actually living. Think about an ordinary morning, nothing special happening. The world outside is whatever it is, gray or bright, quiet or already busy. You have had enough sleep or you have not. The body feels easy or it has its usual complaints. There is nothing on the calendar that particularly excites you and nothing that particularly frightens you. Just an ordinary Tuesday with ordinary contents. And in that Tuesday, in those quiet, unphotographed, uncelebrated hours, there is a choice happening that most women make without knowing they are making it. The choice of where to put the first thought of the day. The choice of what to look at when you look at your life. This is not toxic positivity. The happiest women are not women who tell themselves everything is wonderful when it is not. They are not women who suppress difficulty or pretend that loss has not happened, or deny that certain chapters of their lives have been genuinely painful. They are women who have developed a very particular skill, the skill of holding the full reality of their lives, the hard things and the beautiful things, the griefs and the pleasures, the closed doors and the open windows, and consistently, as deliberately choosing to also see what is genuinely good, not instead of the rest, alongside it. And this sounds like a small thing until you understand the neuroscience behind it, which we will put in plain language rather than clinical language. The brain is what researchers call plastic, meaning it changes and strengthens based on what you repeatedly ask it to do. When you repeatedly practice noticing what is good, what is beautiful, what is worth being present to in your actual life, you are quite literally strengthening the neural pathways associated with that noticing. You are training your brain to find these things more readily, to return to them more naturally, to experience them more fully. You are building, across time, a mind that is better and better at inhabiting joy. And when you repeatedly practice the opposite, when you rehearse grievances, replay what is wrong, the focus on what is missing or what has not worked out, or what other people have done or not done, you are equally literally strengthening the pathways associated with that. You are training your brain in the direction of vigilance, dissatisfaction, and the low-grade background suffering that comes from consistently attending to what is not right. Neither of these is a character trait. Neither is a fixed quality of who you are. Both are practices. Both can be changed. So the happiest women over 60 have not had easier lives. Some of them have had extraordinary difficulty, illness, significant loss, betrayal, poverty, hardship of a kind that most people will not experience. What they have developed over time and through intentional effort is the practice of looking at the real life they actually have, not the one they wished for or expected or feel they were owed, and finding in it, genuinely and without pretense, things worth inhabiting. A morning cup of something hot, the way the light does that thing in the late afternoon, the sound of a particular person's voice, the feeling of a body that, whatever its limitations, is still here and still carrying them forward. The extraordinary, ordinary fact of being alive on this specific day with its specific details, none of which will ever happen again in quite this combination. They are not pretending the difficulties are not real. They are practicing the profound discipline of also seeing what is real and worth loving. And over time, across the years of that practice, the thing that comes to live in them, the thing you notice when you sit across from them in a cafe, is not luck or ease or a life that happened to go right. It is a woman who has made a home in her own experience, a woman who has decided that her life, exactly as it is worth showing up for. And if this is the first time you are watching The Heart Code, welcome. Hit that subscribe button and join this community of women who have chosen to understand themselves more deeply. There is a version of you that already knows everything you have heard today, not as an idea, not as something you read once and thought sounded true, but as a truth you have brushed up against in your own life, in your own quiet moments, in the mornings when you woke up and felt briefly exactly like yourself, in the afternoons when you did something purely for the love of it and forgot to worry about whether anyone was watching, in the conversations where you said exactly what you meant and felt, in the seconds after that strange and underused feeling of being fully present in your own skin. You already know this woman. She is the woman you are when no one needs you to be anything in particular. She is the woman you are when the performance falls away and the management falls away and the careful calibration of yourself to other people's comfort levels falls away. She is the woman who has been there, underneath all the roles and all the years of doing and proving and managing and enduring, waiting with remarkable patience for you to remember that she exists. You are not a woman who needs to be fixed. Let that land for a moment. You are not a project. You are not a set of problems to be solved, or wounds to be healed, or patterns to be overcome. You are a woman who has lived a full and complicated and genuinely remarkable life. A life with real losses and real loves and real courage and real mistakes and real beauty scattered throughout in places you may have forgotten to look. You are a woman who survived things, who chose to keep going when keeping going was not the easy option, who showed up over and over in ways that were not always seen and not always thanked, because that is the kind of woman you are. The happiness that you have seen in the women who move through the world with that particular quality of peace, it is not foreign to you. It is not something you need to earn your way toward through more effort or more self-improvement or more years of working on yourself. It is available to you in the space where you stop performing and start feeling. In the moment where you move the lever of your worth back inside yourself. In the morning where you sit with your coffee and the unread past and say, "Yes, I know you, but I live here now." In the afternoon where you discover or rediscover that you are genuinely good company for yourself. In every ordinary hour where you choose to take up the space that was always yours. In the practice, daily and imperfect and alive, of looking at your real life and finding in it something worth loving. The happiest women you know have not found something you cannot find. They have not been given something you were not given. They have simply, in their different ways and through their different paths, arrived at the same quiet truth, that the life you are living right now, this one with its history and its limitations and its ordinary Tuesdays, is the only stage on which your happiness can ever actually happen. And the woman who gets to inhabit it, fully and honestly and without apology, is already here. She has always been here. She is you. If this video touched something real in you, and I hope it did, I would love for you to hit the like button right now. It takes 1 second and it helps this message reach more women who need it. And then I want to ask you to leave a comment below. Tell me which of these things resonated most with you, or share what you are still working through. Because your words in this community are genuinely valuable, and they help other women feel less alone in their own experience. If there is a woman in your life who needs to hear something in this video today, a friend, a sister, a daughter, someone you love who is going through a hard time or simply searching for something she cannot quite name, please share this with her. You may not know what it means to her, but you will know you sent it. If you are not already subscribed to the Heart Code, please do that now. This community is for women who are committed to understanding themselves more deeply, and we would love to have you here. And if this content has genuinely added something to your life, your support through Super Thanks means more than I can say. It helps us keep making content that goes beyond the surface and reaches the places that actually matter. Thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing to understand yourself. You are exactly where you are supposed to be,